Hi everyone, I'm back with another edition of the American Chess Magazine Puzzle Calendar. Let's get into the puzzle for Monday, April 10th. It was composed by Ulrich Ring in the year 1961. Again, all the puzzles in this series are white to move, mate in 2. If y'all try to solve this puzzle for yourself, then go ahead and pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 5 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 5 out of 5. So here, obviously, Black's king is very trapped, but the problem is that if White tries to unleash some sort of discovered attack, for example, bishop takes h1, then king can always run to c4. The bishop has no squares on this diagonal, and even if it did, the problem is that the black bishop is pinning the white bishop to the king, so the bishop can't move. Otherwise, White has to try some other options to try to give checkmate. So the first move, obviously, I considered was f8 queen, and the idea, obviously, is to threaten queen f6 checkmate. Now, the problem with this one, unfortunately, is that Black can play rook e4, and if queen f6, Black can block. If White takes, then Black can again run, and the bishop has no squares on this diagonal to give checkmate, so if bishop c4, the king just takes it. Therefore, the correct answer in this position is to play the move pawn to e7. This move, although it's not threatening f8 and then queen f6 mate, it is threatening queen d6 to f6 checkmate. Also, White has the threat of knight e6 checkmate. If Black tries to stop both of these with rook to e4, with the idea of stopping knight takes, well, okay, hang on. In this position, White's not actually threatening knight e6 because the queen's pinning it to the king, but this one threat of queen f6 is enough. So as I was saying, after e7, if rook e4, White has not queen f6 because, again, Black can block, but instead White has bishop e6 because they have created a new square for the bishop. Now the king cannot run, and there's no pin to the king anymore. Also, after e7, if Black does nothing, White simply has mate in 1, so therefore this is the solution to the puzzle. This was the puzzle for April 11th. It was composed by C.P. Jarman in the year 1941. Again, if you want to solve this puzzle for yourself, then go ahead and pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 6 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 5 out of 5. Here, White has many checks that look like they might work, but there's always some problems with each of them. Rook f4, the square is being guarded by the knight. Rook d5, the square is being guarded by the rook. Bishop e6, the king can run. And it doesn't look like White has many other checks. So I try to make all of these work at some point or another. First, I try to make bishop e6 work by covering the escape square with rook to g4. But the problem with this one, there's many of them, but the most obvious is bishop takes e3 check. This is a check, so White has to respond. And there's no good square for the king. So here, White does not have mate in 2. There's no other real way to guard this g6 square, so I gave up on the idea of bishop e6. Then I considered trying to make rook d5 check work with the move knight to c5. The idea of this one is simply to blockade the 5th rank. That way if the knight takes, there's rook d5. But here the problem is that Black can play rook takes c5, and there's really nothing White can do here. Next up, I tried to make some sort of rook f4 work, but this is even harder than the other ones because there's just no way to remove this knight, and the knight can always jump, so it can't be blockaded by anything. Therefore, I had to try to find a way to create a new check. And I started to realize that e4 checkmate is really promising. And in order to do that, this rook on e3 has to move away. Now, there's no problem of bishop takes d4 check because knight takes back conveniently happens to be checkmate. So it's all about finding the right square for the rook. Rook e4 obviously is a no because that's blockading the e-pawn's square. Rook d3, I was very hesitant to play just because this the rook on the e5 looks like it might be controlling some key escape squares. And indeed, after rook takes h8, e4 check allows the king to run to e5 or f6. If rook e7, rook e8, any other square, Black has rook takes h8, and now if e4 check, the king can run to f6. So it's really important to be able to control this f6 square. Therefore, the correct answer is to play rook to e6. Now, if Black takes, there's knight takes d4 checkmate, and White is threatening e4 mate. If Black tries to play knight c5 guarding the threat, then White has not e4 because the knight is taking, but rook to d5 because the knight is voluntarily blockading the 5th rank. And if rook to e5, trying to guard against this e4 square, White has rook f6 checkmate. Definitely a harder puzzle. You have to find a whole new mating scheme with e4 and figure out the casework, try to figure out all the ways and why they don't potentially work. This was the puzzle for April 12th. It was composed by Percy Blake in the year 1921. Again, if you want to solve this puzzle for yourself, then go ahead and pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 5 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 5 out of 5. So here, Black's king is very trapped once again, and the thing that drew my attention the most was this pin along the d5, the 6th rank. That means that c5 is a very weak piece, but I couldn't find a way to attack immediately, so instead I tried to focus on this b7 pawn. Rook h7 unfortunately does not work because b1 queen guarding this pawn. So therefore I tried to play rook b5. Now rook b5 looks a bit more hopeful because it's blocking the b file. Now white has queen takes b7 checkmate. The king can't run away, and the d pawn's pinned, so trying to escape with d5 wouldn't even work. But unfortunately black has two defenses here. The more cool one, I guess, is knight to d7. If queen takes, black has king to d5, and if bishop takes, then black has king to c7. So targeting b7 didn't really work, therefore I circled back to my original idea, which was attacking the bishop on c5. Unfortunately, queen to c4 does not work, even though white is threatening queen takes c5 checkmate. The problem is that white's no longer really guarding the c7 square, so black has rook d5 as a defense. Now, if queen to b5, black can simply run the king to c7. One thing you notice is that knight e7 check doesn't work because king e7 and king to b6. The knight is also kind of important in guarding black's key escape squares. Therefore, the right answer is bishop takes d6. White is threatening rook takes c5 checkmate. If bishop takes d6, then now the bishop is pinned, and white has the option of playing queen to d7 check. Oh, sorry, this is not checkmate because black can just take it. That's a silly mistake. White's actual checkmate is the move queen to c4. Now the bishop is pinned, so it cannot block, and black has nothing to do. If black tries rook takes d6, trying to remove the attacker of c5, the problem is here that white has bishop takes g2 checkmate. This is, again, a puzzle of many pins. The rook cannot block because it's being pinned to the king. If black tries something else to try to stop this threat, for example, pawn to b6, then white has knight a7 checkmate because the king can't run to b6. And I don't think black has any other defenses because knight to d7 allows bishop takes d7. Now the bishop is controlling the c7 square. So all in all, this puzzle used a lot of mating themes. If you saw the pin along the 6th rank in the beginning, then it's slightly easier because you know you have to target the c5. This was the puzzle for April 13th. It was composed by Alexander Galish in the year 1901. Again, if you want to solve this puzzle for yourself, go ahead and pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 4 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 4.5 out of 5. So the problem in this position is that black's king always has this annoying c5 square to run to. For example, the strategy I used in this position first was to see, if I can place my queen anywhere, where it would be mate. Queen e6, queen e4, all of these squares allow king to, well, not queen d4, but that allows king c6. But a lot of these squares allow king to c5 king to c5 running away. So my first thought was, well, okay, why don't I try queen to c4 then? That is checkmate, but unfortunately, it's impossible for the queen to get to this square. It's like, what, queen a4, black just takes, queen c8 and queen c6 are both guarded well by the knight, so white can't really get the queen to c4. But at the same time, white does need to deal with this problem of the c5 square. Bishop b4 is kind of sad because you're losing control of the d4 square, so black can simply run their king there instead. So for a long time, I didn't figure out how to guard the c5 square. But then I realized that knight a4 is a very good way to do this. Now, knight a4, white is not threatening anything by itself, which is why it took me a bit of time to find. But the idea is that white is guarding the c5 square, and no matter what black plays, black is actually in zugzwang right now. For example, if king to e4, then white has bishop to a2 checkmate, because now the king cannot run to the e4 square. If rook takes a4 or rook anywhere, then white has queen to b5 checkmate. If rook to c5, then white has knight b6 because the king cannot take its own rook. If the knight moves to c6, then white has queen to e6 checkmate. And if black moves the knight to anywhere else, then the mate that white has here is queen to e4. If king to c4, already covered that. And black has no other move, so black is in zugzwang here. It's an interesting puzzle because you have to stop the king from running c5, even though you're not threatening anything immediately. For Friday, April 14th, it was composed by Valerish Termasov in the year 2021. Again, if you want to solve this puzzle for yourself, then go ahead and pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 2 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 5 out of 5. Here, black's king has 3 escape squares, king e6, king e4, and king g4. It's a matter of figuring out how to give checkmate against each of these. And first I thought, well, if king g4, then if I can play queen f3 checkmate, then that's really nice. If king to e4 or if king to e6, though, I didn't really see a direct way to give checkmate. So I thought, well, what are other ways that white can try to give some sort of mate with the queen close to the king? Then I noticed that if king to g4, queen h5 looks very close to checkmate. The problem is, of course, black has these 2 squares. Therefore, what white should do is play bishop to c7. Now, black looks like they have a whole heck of a lot of escape squares, but in reality, every single one of these leads to mate in 1. King g4, as mentioned earlier, leads to queen h5. King to g5 allows queen to f4. King to f6 allows queen to e5. King to e6 also allows queen to e5. And finally, king to e4 also allows queen to e5. So it's very cool how there's so many different mating patterns in the same puzzle, even though it looks kind of funny because black only has a king left, but that's the spirit of these artistic puzzles. This was the puzzle for last weekend, April 15th through 16th. It was composed by David Shire in the year 2000. Again, if you want to solve this puzzle for yourself, then go ahead and pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 5 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 5 out of 5. Here, two checks immediately jump to mind, queen f7 check and bishop e4 check. These are both almost mate, but they failed due to king g5 and king f4 respectively. So I thought, well, why not try to cover one of these squares? Bishop c7 was the first move that I considered. It's definitely very reasonable, threatening bishop e4 checkmate, and in fact, knight d4 checkmate. It's almost impossible for black to stop both of these threats. For example, if black stops one of them, white simply plays the other. And even a move like rook f4, which looks like he's guarding against both of them. The problem is that here white has rook to c5 checkmate, because now the king again cannot run to f4. So actually white's going to need 3 checkmates, including rook to c5. So it looks like it's hopeless. But then black has this very annoying defensive move, knight to c6. Now bishop e4 is being blocked, knight d4 is being guarded, and rook to c5 doesn't work because black can block with knight to e5. So unfortunately, bishop c7 does not work. I feel like the hardest part of this puzzle is seeing that bishop c7 doesn't work, but once you see that doesn't work, the only other move to consider is bishop to d8. This move is is controlling the g5 square, so threatening queen to f7 checkmate, and this checkmate is actually impossible for black to stop. Like, black literally has no defense. It's hard for black to even consider a way of defense. Two, I guess, kind of methods are bishop to g5, aiming to block on f6, and bishop to c3 with the same idea of blocking on f6. The problem with bishop to g5 is that white has queen to h7 checkmate because the king, again, still cannot run to the g5 square. And bishop to c3 fails in the same way because I lied here. White is setting 2 checkmates, queen f7 and queen h7, and it's impossible to stop both of these. So those were the puzzles for last week. Sorry for the really late post. I know I was supposed to post on Wednesday and then on Saturday and then on Sunday, but I was kind of busy because I am recording a surprise series that will come out hopefully soon. So I hope you enjoyed the puzzles. As always, if you enjoy my videos, please like and subscribe, and that'll be all for today. Bye!